date. And just looking at the what we have here is what we've given you is 4 different scenarios. One which is more of a greenfields, traditional type of development, and then each one of these scenarios, represented by the colors here, is looking towards more per capita. So your low end of the revenue stream is the medium density. So that's probably what's influencing this upward trend here. This is taking the expenditures, so looking at just the pure operating expenditures, the day-to-day costs associated with the recreational programs, etc. And if you subtract the two, there's our net revenue. There's some non-cost, non-DCable cost. In this particular municipality, there's not a lot of non-DCable costs. And then so it's just the difference between these two when we add in the debt, and we represented it on a 20-year debt charge. When you do that, it's not that huge. But now when we start to take a look at the life cycle, you can see the impacts. And the life cycle has been looked at if we assume the all of that infrastructure and we start to put away a little bit of money. So if it's going to be replaced in 30 years, we're going to put money away in a bank account every year, and we'll fully have the money to replace it in the 30th year. So that's how we've looked at it. If you don't put that money away, then by the time 30 years from now and you have a capital budget, it looks like this. So we've tried to represent it on a year-to-year basis. And you can see as we add these up, you can see that they get into a negative on growth. And if we take a look at it on a per capita or a per household basis, you can see that per household is in the $500 to $250 range. If you look at it on per capita, about $170 from $100 to $170. So right now, this is the results. This reflects a lot of the work we do that we've done with many other municipalities, the Mississaugas, the Miltons, the Barries, and such. Very similar types of patterns. And then this is just to quantify it for this particular municipality. I hate numbers like this, but this is what we presented with the MFOA, and municipal finance people like numbers, so I apologize. But this just quantifies in those graphs. On the revenue side, we had about $9.3 million by the time we hit the end of the 20-year forecast. Non-tax revenue of another 2.7, so the total revenue that we were talking about was almost $12 million. Operating costs were about $8.3 million, minor amount in the debt charges for non-DCable projects. So we're in a net positive of about 3.6, but when you add that infrastructure, 7.2, this is how we got down to that very large negative impact. I'll leave the presentation there. As I say, concluding remarks, generally residential do not pay for themselves. We've looked at low, medium, high density developments, intensification versus greenfield. Generally, the trends are very similar. The non-residential, the commercial industrial, normally adds a net positive contribution, so continuing to foster those jobs and those developments within your community certainly help in the overall financial picture. So, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Gary. We'll take a few now. I have Mayor Jaworski up.
Thank you. On your graphs there, you excluded water, wastewater, and that. Is that because it's based on consumption as a utility, or were there other reasons for that being excluded from the calculations?
In this particular presentation, they focused in on the property tax. Water and wastewater can be very similar. Water and wastewater are very expensive to undertake. The average cost per house to get the water in, so the whole system to get it into your house and get it out, normally trends somewhere in the $25,000 to say $40,000 per customer basis. So once again, the operating costs normally are, the incremental costs aren't too bad, but when you layer on the capital, it becomes quite a burden to deal with all of that infrastructure.
And if you could go back a couple of slides to your first one that shows the graphics. The bar charts.
Yes.
And there we go. If we take a look at the very end there, that's a cumulative surplus over a period of, is it 10 years or 20 years?
20 years.
So is there, if we were to graph it on a year-by-year basis, is there false hope in the first few years, I would think, because it's really, the consumption of that really gets based or gets accounted for later on in the cycle, probably somewhere.
Through you, Chair Henry, and good to see you, Gary. If I look at the chart, the bar chart you have in front of you there, basically except for and this is contrary to my mindset, but it says up to the life cycle part, growth does pay for itself, except when you take into account the asset, the life cycle replacement.
In the early stages, you have more of the revenues than the expenditures. So in this particular case, it suggests that it's a net positive, but over time, as I say, you'll run into the negatives.
Right now, I know it's not a fair question, but as far as Kitchener uses an 80-year life cycle replacement for their undergrounds and for their structures and so on. I don't know what we have. At one time we talked